Hi, I'm Jim Miller. I'm here with Terrence Moore. The FlipSide starts right now. Welcome to the show. We're pleased to have with us tonight former mayor and current city councilman Bob Bruchey. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Jim.
So it's our first year show of 2022, and what we wanted to do is really talk about a city, a county, and maybe even a state wish list. What would we like to see those various government agencies do over the next year? What is going to be important for our constituents? What's going to be important for economic development? What's going to be important to help with this battle of COVID? So this is more or less just an open conversation, so let's get started. First of all, let's talk about the city. I would be remiss, and I know you've been a longtime supporter of the multi-use athletic facility. Talk to us about that.
Well, I got to be honest, it was as much a surprise to me last year as I think it was pretty much everybody else that the state of Maryland stepped up and, Paul Quarterman and our delegation and, Dan Spedden and Greg Snook and that whole group accomplished what we couldn't get done in 22 years. Yeah. So I was shocked and pleased and relieved that this debt burden will not be on the city of Hagerstown or the county.
Talk about that.
Well, it's simple. I mean, we had it broken down back in 2012 where it was going to be split three ways, and the city was going to incur at least up to $12 million in debt on a facility back then, and then the state would do theirs, and then the owner would do the last third. But this time, again, thanks to Senator Quarterman and our delegation and all those folks, they got the funding through the Maryland Stadium Authority, who will fund it and pay the bonds through proceeds from the lottery, and it's actually miraculous what has transpired there. Our portion, we're still going to be probably.
Now, you mean the
city of Hagerstown is probably still going to be 10 to 12 million, but it's for a parking deck on West Antietam Street, where we've talked about, again, for 20 years.
Yes, we have. Now, is that in the old Hagerstown Trust parking lot?
It is.
Or Columbia?
Yeah, it'll be right beside District Court.
Okay.
Yep. So, that's still going to be, it's in our CIP. We've moved it up to coincide with the time schedule for the new facility. And everything right now is moving along as planned. Acquisition of properties, things like that are happening. And so, yeah, I tell you, it's going to be a great project for downtown. It's going to change the face of downtown for a century. It truly will. So, I'm excited about it.
So, obviously, there were a lot of people that were against the stadium for a lot of years. Does this new plan address any of the concerns that they had, and if so, how?
Well, I believe you can take 50% of that negativity away now, because that was focused mainly on
who's paying for
debt,
it?
right? Who's paying for it? Because everybody was afraid that the city was going to have to raise taxes to pay for the debt, and well, none of that's going to come true now. So again, I think you can take probably away half of that. You're never going to get all the people who were opposed to this to see it as a positive project until it's completed. Senator Quarterman for a couple of years spouted some mail call references about how nobody will go there and it's terrible and blah 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 and it's unsafe, and that was all in the University of Maryland. And now, of course, the University System of Maryland downtown is the best thing since sliced bread. Mm-hmm. So again, let's see it get completed. Let's see it do what it's going to do. not just baseball, but all the other events and the things that'll happen that'll drive a couple 100,000 people a year into the core of the city of Hagerstown, and create an atmosphere where people want to live. I mean, that's what we're trying. We're trying to change. What's been a decaying core for the last 30, 40 years. We're trying to change that. So let's change it and let's see what happens.
In the stadium, from my understanding as well, wasn't a standalone project that really was petitioned down in Annapolis as well to get the support. So there were some ancillary projects to support the downtown as a whole. So it wasn't just this multi-use facility, which, as you know, this is where we kind of transitioned the name of it as well, away from the perception that it was just going to be about baseball.
Right.
It's going to be about so much more.
Right.
And I hear that a lot of people have kind of changed their mind, based on the numbers in their taxes. But what's the wait and see going to feel like with the constituents right now? Waiting a number of years for it to happen, and what's going to happen in that interim as we progressively get to that point, especially with the climate change and what we've seen with the pandemic and some of the other job issues that we have in the city and county and country as a whole.
Yeah. Well, the great thing about this is that we're slated to play baseball in April of 23. So if that comes to fruition, they don't have a long time to wait. But and again, it's going to be, you're going to have to, see the project, be involved. I mean, we're going to keep people involved, I'm sure, every step of the way to let people know where we're at and what's happening. And when I say we, I don't mean the city. I mean, the group as a whole. And it's going to be it's going to be painful a little bit. I'm pretty sure because you got demolition and construction, and I mean all that's going to happen, and it's going to be painful for a little while. But I think a lot of the fear that I hear from people was the traffic's going to be terrible, and it's just not true. We don't every traffic study that's been completed shows that that's not going to be a problem. Most of the events that happen, and especially just baseball, which will happen, 70 times a season, start, the gates don't open up until 6 o'clock, and people aren't going to start flowing into downtown until around maybe the 5 o'clock mark. By that time, a lot of the traffic is getting out of town.
Well, if your parking deck is on Antietam Street, arguably there may not be the traffic is not necessarily going to be concentrated among that row of houses. Which, is it fair to say that the residential part of it is what was of concern?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I look at some of the concerns of the people that live in that 100 block of Summit Avenue, and some of it was lighting, and of course, back in 2012, we showed them, when we had the event over at Hager Hall, how lighting would work, and that standing outside at nighttime when a game is going on, you actually had less lumens outside than what the moon put off. So there were a lot of fears that if people would have addressed them. And sought out answers at that event, would have been laid to rest. Some of it was sound, Well, in today's facilities, sound it's not like in the old stadium. In the old stadium, you could hear the PA system, blocks away. But nowadays, with these new modern day facilities, sound is located and is inward, and it's not out resonating through the neighborhoods. One person had a fear of the fireworks. I don't know, fireworks at 10 o'clock, 10:30 in the evening. I think that's pretty cool, but that's me.
I'm a city boy, so some of those issues that I have heard doesn't resonate with me.
Right.
People say traffic. I don't think you know what traffic looks like.
No idea what traffic is. Right.
So
exactly.
I even when I see some of the street closures downtown sometimes and I hear the complaints, I'm like, 3-4 minutes is not the 30-40 minutes, the traffic jam that you get driving through some of major cities. But at the same time, I think there's a want for, economic growth.
Sure.
But what comes with that is some of the byproduct. And you got to be okay with taking some of that byproduct. And I know you mentioned some of the biggest fear was about crime. So I know now when you're bringing more people into a concentrated area, I think the perception of crime originally was blown out of proportion, if you ask me. You're looking at the numbers. I think victimless crime was like less than 1%, if that. When we bring those people in, how do you dispel some of those fears of what's going to take to make people feel safe as we bring in more people, not just from the city into the core, but maybe from PA, West Virginia, and in other parts of Maryland?
Well, the way I look at, unfortunately, maybe fortunately, I don't know, I'm conservative. So I look at things on a statistical answer. If you're going to increase your accessible base, and actually this project will increase the accessible base within a 16-block area.
Explain cesspool base.
Cesspool base is like my house. My house, is assessed at, I think it's like 122. So I pay taxes on 122. Now, the accessible base is going to rise because your appraisals of your properties are going to go up also. Okay. So the value of your property is going to increase too. Okay. Now, that's a good thing and a bad thing to people. It's a bad thing because, well, my taxes are going to go up. It's a good thing because, well, I can sell my property and make money. So it's, if you're increasing your accessible base, you're increasing the opportunity to be able to hire more public safety personnel, to be able to do these kind of things that make people feel safe. And I got to tell you, to be honest, this is an age-old question. If we put a cop on every corner, will you feel safe? I don't think you will. I think safety, feeling safe, is a perception. It's how you perceive it. I can walk downtown at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't feel unsafe. But then again, I know I don't go in dark alleys at 3 o'clock in the morning. I know that, Right. I use common sense. I know my surroundings. And so I don't feel unsafe. But somebody else walking downtown at 3 o'clock in the morning may feel unsafe. But that's their perception of what safety is.
But on the other end of that, and you said if you put a policeman on every street corner, let's reverse that logic a minute. What if you put a crowd of people that are there for a baseball game and then are at the Schmuckel Stoop for drinks afterwards, or 28 South, or one of our other restaurant facilities, and we're all, it's a group environment, it's a group atmosphere, and we're leaving and we're walking down the street and we see all these other people that we saw at the baseball game or we saw at do you feel safe then? I would argue you probably would.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Everybody says, well, you go downtown, Hagerstown, you see the homeless person, you see this person, okay. There are homeless people, in Baltimore at Fells Point. Okay, there are. Nobody complains about them, all right? Because they're hidden by the masses of everybody else. Okay, so, when you're driving, let's just say you're driving down the first block of West Washington Street toward the square, and currently you see these 3 people sitting over at University of Maryland Park, and they're homeless, and so maybe you feel unsafe, or if you're walking by there, maybe you feel unsafe. But you add another 20 people in that same area, your whole perception changes.
I agree, and I know people don't want to hear it. Again, from New York, family in law enforcement, and one time my cousin told me some of the best witnesses are the homeless.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Because they're present, they're there, and police officers go right to the homeless because they know the area, they know who was there, who walked by, they make contact, and they're so vigilant of their own surroundings to feel safe on the street themselves, who are living on the street, that they've been great eyewitnesses, and you see more homeless people who are eyewitnesses versus homeless people who are committing crime.
Right.
And it also adds to the fact that the more people in a populated area, the less likely someone is to commit crime.
Yeah.
What you may see is the crime that happens between drunken fights that may happen, those are the kind of things, again.
But that can happen just as much out of the city as it can in the city.
Absolutely, and that's why I said there's not victim crime where I'm walking down the street and someone robs me.
Right.
It's I'm getting into altercation between somebody I know or because something happened in an event, but it's not where I feel unsafe because I have complete control not to put myself in that situation.
Well, and the reality is, and I think this was a point you maybe were trying to make with your comment about the police going to the homeless people because they're great witnesses. Just because you're homeless doesn't mean you're a criminal.
No.
Right.
No.
Okay, and I would argue, and I think statistics. I've read some statistics in other cities where when you bring a crowd of good people into a location, the ne'er-do-wells, so to speak, go elsewhere.
Well, it's like, and I hate to use this as a reference, like, you know, when you turn the lights off on
The
cockroaches. I mean, you know, and that's what happens. I mean, you know, bad people don't want to be seen by good eyeballs. They just don't want to be, and so you're not going to have that. I think the fear of increased crime with this project is a perception that has yet to play out, and I don't think it will. But you know, but again, those are things that people are going to have to experience themselves as this project evolves and moves forward.
Speaking of eyeballs, we need to get some eyeballs on a commercial or two. So can you stay with us for another segment or two?
Okay.
We're back in just a couple of minutes with City Councilman Bob Bruchey. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're here again with Bob Bruchey, City Councilman, City of Hagerstown. Terrence, I'll give you the first question in this segment.
I want to go to our elected officials. As a constituent, we've elected from city council, mayors, our delegates, our senators, as well as our county commissioners. What's going on to the point, because I know the perception externally is there is no cooperation, there's bad blood, the relationship isn't there. And I think as a constituent, I would love to see my government officials really collaborate and work well to have the best interests at heart, which should be our residents and our economic growth.
100%.
So talk to me what's going on there and what's your perception of it as well?
Well, you know, for years and years, and I can go back because I can speak on this because being involved since 1997, you know, every time there's an article in the Herald Mail, it's all, you know, top of the fold, bold headlines, city, county, not getting along, whatever. Nothing further from the truth, because we do. Now, we don't always agree, but we do, you know, collaborate on a lot of things. I mean, the North Point development on Vasel Boulevard is a perfect example of that. You know, $150 million investment, 1,500 jobs, $6 million in road improvements at the county and the city and the developer all partnered together for. So we do cooperate greatly with that. There are some issues, unfortunately, between the city and the county that currently we have a 2x2 committee going on, and that's Commissioner Charlie Burkett and Wayne Kiefer, and then myself and Kristen Elshire. And we're meeting to talk about issues that are important that have not been resolved over the last probably quarter of a century. All right, water allocation, MRGA, UGA, those kind of things. MRGA, for those who don't know, is medium range growth area. The UGA is the urban growth area. You know, and for me, and I believe for anybody who's in an elected position, at any of these levels, you know, the municipalities' two top priorities are much like the counties and the states and the feds. You know, public safety and infrastructure. Those are the two main priorities. And infrastructure is not just, you know, roads and bridges. Infrastructure are water lines and sewer lines and, you know, transmission mains and those kind of things. So, you know, we've been having an issue with, you know, how do we allocate, you know, because unfortunately, whether people believe it or not, we have the Potomac River, but water is a finite, you know, utility. I mean, that's all there is to it. We can only pump so much, you know. Right now, we're at a max of 15.8 million a day, million gallons a day that we can treat and pump at our peak. We average, you know, 14.3 in that kind of range. But we have some inactive allocations out there that have been there for decades. So we're trying to address, okay, how do we recapture some of those and put back into our allocation so that we can free up, gallons per day for projects that need to happen. Okay, and those projects need to happen within the MRGA if possible. Okay, if you're outside the MRGA, if you're inside the MRGA, you're gonna get water. Okay, because that's our medium range growth area. If you're outside the MRGA, then you have to apply to
Right.
be able to get water. And there's 10 things, 10 criteria for exemption. If you fall within one of those, then it's up to mayor and council whether they want to pass a resolution to give you water or not. All right. I don't want to be the person who stifles economic growth. Okay. I don't believe that's my job. I believe my job is to foster economic growth for our people. So we're kind of in a situation where, if we can figure it out, if we can figure out what we can claw back to add to our allocation, and we can figure out what the city's MRGA needs are, then we're going to have, this total minus MRGA, and this is what's left over. And this is what the county can use outside the MRGA, and they've got to plan their growth accordingly.
So is there any state influence on allocation?
There is a state influence, especially when it comes to what you can treat, okay? Because right now we can only treat 15.8 million max a day.
And that's a state
Million gallons
regulation.
per day. That's how we're regulated to treat it. That's a
And
fed in the state.
our infrastructure, would it support more than that if that allocation increased?
No.
Okay, so
And
we would
that's-
have to do a major infrastructure upgrade.
and we're talking $100 million for transmission lines and things like that, which I believe have to be part of a discussion if we're going to increase our capacity at the R.C. Wilson plant, and who's going to participate in that, and how much can we increase it, and where is the growth going to be. But sewer's not as big an issue, although we are pretty close to what we can treat at our wastewater treatment plant. But the county has theirs too. So you've got to focus growth where you can use that utility. But unfortunately, a lot of where their flow comes from is outside the MRGA. So we've been talking to them about, okay, how do we squeeze the MRGA like a balloon, okay? Let's say you have a big balloon and you want to squeeze it closed on this end, it's going to expand it on this end, okay? Let's figure out, because again, the MRGA is based on finite resources that we have. So let's figure it out. Where do you want your growth? And part of our discussion is that, perhaps our economic development staff and planning staff and the county's economic development staff and planning staff get together and review the MRG every 2 years and figure out where they want their next growth to happen at.
Now,
and I
what-
think that answers the question of how we allocate.
And where's the demand that comes in that with the new manufacturing that's coming into the community? Is that placing a greater demand on that, or is that outside the allocation? How does that play a part?
Well, it really all depends. Again, if we can claw back some allocation that's unused, that's sitting out there and have been sitting there for decades, then it's going to only better our position to help with any future growth. But we've got to figure out where they want that growth to be. It can't just be so hopscotch all over, because you can't get there.
You need transmission lines.
Yeah,
and,
you can't
and
get
everything.
there.
So let me ask you. Let me dig on in this unused allocations, because the math isn't working for me. So 15 point something is with maximum capacity. We're
Right.
at 14.4 or whatever you said.
14.3 is what we're active. Okay.
So that's the water that's really being
Being
pumped
pushed
out.
out, right.
Okay. So where is the unused allocation? How does that buy us anything?
We've got 1.4 million gallons per day of unused allocation. People who have paid for allocation because they've had to pay for it, okay? And it's sitting on a piece of property someplace that has been sitting there for 20 years, all right? And has not been used, okay? Those are the people that we're going to try to entice to either do something or
Give back the
give us
allocation.
back our allocation. And maybe it's buyback now. I don't know how, we haven't quite formalized how we're going to do that yet.
But if you take the 14.2 million that we're currently pumping and you add 1.4 million new to it,
Well, no, that 1.4 comes out of that 14.3 because the 14.3 is the total allocation right now.
okay, so it's the theoretical allocation.
Right, so really you're more like 12 something.
That's the total water that can be pumped, not the total water
Right,
that is
right.
pumped.
15.8 is the ultimate max.
Right, and the average,
Is
the average
14.3.
is, okay, gotcha.
Now that's all allocation. That's used and unused.
Right, understood.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And so, this is, I guess, this is where a lot of the constituents are looking at, because I think because of that, we don't see a growth in homes, new developments, because that puts a high constraint on that water allocation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and we know that we really have to pump up our middle class, because right now we have our homeowner rate is extremely low. And we want to be able to recruit and bring in more people in homeownership, as well as I believe we should be developing people to a position where they can buy homes as well to increase our tax base, as well as to ensure that we have larger salaries and people who have home ownership usually have more pride in their home communities as well. So how do we know we need homes and we have a finite amount of water right now. What do we do to solve that? So how do we get those homes? What is the plan? I know you mentioned some incentivizing some of the individuals that have the allocation that they paid for. Is it about buying it back? Is there something else can be done?
It
Can the
depends,
government
yeah.
use their strong arm to get some of that as well? What does that look like?
Well, I'm not much of a strong arm kind of guy. I believe my consensus on things is, show me how to get to a yes, whatever that looks like. You know what I mean? So, I'm probably more giving than most when it comes to how do we get to a yes to make something happen. But let's take, for example, currently on North Burhans, there's going to be a housing development that goes in there by the bridge between AC&T and the bridge, okay? You have housing planned off Salem Avenue and Marshall Street, okay? Now, these are median income housing, not low income, not high income, median income. So the kind of people that
we need,
that
right?
we need, right. So those are the kind of things that are already planned. Water's allocated, okay? So, it's already there.
Right.
That's all part of these numbers already. So those aren't the things that scare me. Housing units don't scare me. It's the development that's going to happen, up Route 40, past the sheet store at Hewitt's. Okay, that's outside the MRGA. It's actually outside the UGA. But they're going to want water if they develop there. Okay, that doesn't factor into these numbers because that's not part of any equation right now. That's where I believe when the county gets allocated, okay, here's your fuel tank. It's full with this much. You keep an eye on it because that's the water you're going to use. That you don't have to come back and beg the city every single time to try to get water allocated. I think that's where we got to get to, so that we have an answer. Now, and again, the county wants to help, maybe get some help from the state. We increase some transmission lines. We can be able to increase our production at the R.C. Wilson plant. Things get better. But it's not always just about, I guess I should have preferenced this earlier, it's not all just about how many gallons per day. It's about water pressure. If you go out to Black Rock and talk to people out there, they're angry. If more than 3 people at the same time are taking a shower in Black Rock,
So
there's no water pressure.
So how does the finger pointing begin? Where does that come from? It sounds like you're having these conversations, but what makes headlines is you're arguing over 911 and back debt between each other, and you're not meeting. Yeah. Where's that coming from?
Well, I think a lot of when first off, if you ever watch a joint meeting of the mayor and council, especially in council chamber, you'll see a lot of cooperation. Okay, you just will from both sides. All right. But a lot of that, and one thing we've got to remember is that we each have very qualified staff, both entities, okay? Government officials should let staff do their jobs, then come to the government officials with a solution about how to address an issue, and then enact it. When you start, putting government officials in these places, and they're part of the conversation, things get skewed, and that's not good for anybody, because everybody has their own perception about how they want something to happen. Let staff come up with the answer. City staff, county staff, sit down, talk about the MRGA and what growth's going to happen for the next 2 years. Come to a joint meeting of mayor and council. Mayor and council and the county commissioners agree. That's where growth's going to happen. I think it's as simple as that. Now, getting there may not be that simple, but I think that's the simple solution.
We need to pause just for a minute for some more commercials, but we'll be back in just a few more minutes with City Councilman Bob Bruchey. Welcome back. Once again, we're here with Bob Bruchey, City Councilman, City of Hagerstown. Bob, I'm going to play off of Terrence's tease there. Talk about the 911.
Well, and that always captures a headline. Okay, we have paid $405,000 a year to the county for 911 services since 2010. Okay. So for 12 years, let's just say 11, because we haven't paid this one yet. Let's just say 11. That's $4.4 million that city taxpayers have paid to the county commissioners, to their general fund, for 911 services. Okay. Now, the whole reason that we combined 911 services back then was President Bush's federal requirement that be a consolidated 911 center where all dispatch comes through and can be able to be filtered out. Everybody can listen to everybody. Because of what happened in 2001, they didn't have that ability back then, and there's a lot of things that got missed. Okay, so we had dispatch at HPD. We transferred 13 people to the 911 center. Okay, when they opened up for this, that saved the county from training 13 people. Hiring and training, okay? And our $405,000 was to cover any kind of ancillary cost for retirement and other post-employment benefits of these 13 people. Now, we currently have one person left, one, and they still want $405,000, okay? They say that the city generates more police calls than anybody else. Well, as proven at their own meeting when we discussed this at the county, actually we don't do any more than everybody else combined, but nobody else pays for it. We're the only ones. But keep in mind, the citizens of Hagerstown, and you live in the city proper, right?
Yes.
You pay city and county taxes.
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay. So currently, we are 23% of the county's general fund. Okay? Now, that's just talking about property tax. I'm not even talking about income tax or anything. It is property tax. So at 23%, city residents pay into the county $30,974,000. It's a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
Out of that, $6.2 million funds 911. That's the county general fund's funding for 911. Now, that doesn't even incorporate the cell phone charge that the county receives. On every cell phone, there's a charge for 911 service, okay? Every cell phone. So at 23% of $6.2 million, you and I already pay $1.4 million to the county for 911. And now we got to pay $405,000 more. I'm sorry. Again, math-wise, it just doesn't make sense to me. But so So part of the discussion in our 2+2 is how do we address this? Okay, that's what, two things we had to work on. Water allocation and 911 were the first two issues we attacked. And I think we came up with a great compromise. And hopefully that compromise pans out and everybody will be satisfied. Not happy, satisfied, okay?
Right.
And I believe everybody gets what they want.
No, in running a mediation company, we always say you never want a win-lose situation.
Right.
Because all it is going to raise conflict somewhere else.
Yeah.
If you feel like you didn't win, but if both can come with a win-win where both gave up something, but yet gained something, and you can collaboratively come up with an idea that is agreed upon, then no one feels slighted in that conversation. So it's good to hear that those collaborative conversations happen. But good information, how is the public knowing what's going on in these conversations? How do they know that you're having these conversations that are contrary to what they see in the headlines of their newspaper or in their news feeds every day?
Well, I
They
think
watch the flip side.
they watch the flip side. I'm probably doing a lot.
You see
out
what
of
I did
school
right there,
now.
Terrence?
I love it.
But you know, when the resolution comes about, you know, we're not going to report on
No.
everything that was said in a 2+2 committee meeting.
But-
okay?
but how much you wanna
Because
bet-
that's why we do 2+2.
Yeah.
Because we don't have to, and we can hash out some things, and everybody knows that I'm a great language guy, and I like to use some of it once in a while, and not
Can
the
you
good
explain-
language part, but yeah.
Explain why it's 2+2.
Well, 2+2 is because if you have a third party of either city or county, it's considered a meeting because you have 3 voting members, and the 3 voting members constitute a quorum. So you can't have a quorum between 2 governing bodies and not have it advertised and publicized.
Correct. All right.
Tangentially, would you agree with me that when the resolution comes out, it's probably not going to be top of full page 1?
Oh, 100%. It may not even make the paper.
Right.
I mean, you may have to read it in
Well, the
Facebook
paper's so
somewhere.
thin anymore, you can't really.
That's true. That's
Now,
true.
you talked about relationship within intergovernment. What about the relationship with the business community as well? Because I know there's some tension as well that goes there, and there's a lot of cooperation that happens, but there's also a perception that government doesn't play well with the more private sector.
Well, I would have to say I beg to differ with that because, from my perspective anyway, but again, it's my perspective. I know that when somebody comes, back when I was mayor, and somebody came to me with an idea about something or wanted to do something, my people got assigned to it, they got on it, they came up with a solution, okay? Now, I know there's a lot of hate and discontent sometimes for permitting and inspections, okay? But you get what people fail to realize is that when an inspector signs his name on something, okay, he is on the hook for that, all right, because he signed his name. Just like at Hagerstown Ford, when one of my inspectors who inspect used cars does an inspection and he signs off, and if something happens, he's the one's got to answer to that. Nobody else does. It's him because he's the one who inspected it. So these guys and girls are going to make sure that they do their job right, and it's for the public safety and health and welfare of the citizens, that they do their job right and they feel secure signing off that everything that they needed to have happen happened. And I applaud them because they take a lot of grief, okay? And I give them some. I give them grief a lot, and they usually correct me. Sometimes I've come out on top, and not very often. But and I understand their viewpoint, and sometimes it's frustrating for especially for business. I mean, canning coffee, that was a fight, trying to get things done, and so there's little things that happen that maybe some businesses may not feel the city went out of their way to make something happen. But again, I'm always the show me how to get to a yes and make something happen. and I'm happy with it once we figure that out. So.
Absolutely, and I think it's all about relationships.
Oh,
you know,
100%. Yeah.
And being able to have that direct connection, because we've been looking in a kind of looking at entrepreneur and economic. How do we help some of our business development, some of the other work that we're doing as well? And one of the top things is people don't know what they don't know. Code is not something you can pick up on,
No.
and a lot of people don't understand even from their business design of when they go into a building, what they have to do, what they're responsible for, what the owner of the building is, or if they purchased the building. Yeah. And I just think there's some opportunity there to build those relationships.
Doghouse. Look what he had to go through, and that was from a prior owner.
Right.
So, those are the kind of things that give us a black eye, but those are the kind of things we're trying to correct to make sure that he has a safe business for him,
right.
And it's difficult. I look at what they do, and we can use the Hamilton Hotel as an example. Okay, after the collapse, there's been a lot going on down there, but they're going to make sure it's right. Okay. And that building comes back and is pristine and does what they want to do in that building, and have the businesses on the first floor and the residential up top. And I think they're poised to do that within the next 6 months, six months to a year, to have that completely done. So, but it's been a tough road. I mean, it's something that, I don't know how many collapses my people have ever been involved in to that magnitude. I mean, we're talking 3 stories. So that was a lot.
All right, we're going to pause one more time. And Bob, you'll stay with us for one more segment?
I guess.
Okay. Stay with us for more with Bob Bruchey. We'll be back after these messages. Welcome back. Again, we're here with Bob Bruchey, Hagerstown City Councilman. Bob, let's talk about the pandemic and recovery from the pandemic. What impact has that had on the city? What are the city's plans? How is the city dealing with this latest variant of the virus?
Well, I'll tell you that a lot of our city staff are double vaxxed. A lot are boosted. Don't know if we need to get another booster yet. I'm not, but I have medical issues that I don't want to put at risk for that. I'm careful. Matter of fact, you're a little close, but I try to protect myself.
Social distance.
Yeah. We received a lot of CARES Act money that repaid us for a lot of the things that we had to do when it came to interacting with the general public during the pandemic. Okay, safety issues, hygiene, things like that, and we also got $10.2 million to help with other things, and another $10.2 million this year coming up. But it's very restrictive. And you just can't do what you want. It's got to fall within certain parameters, and so we're trying to figure out. That's probably, I've never seen it so hard to spend $10 million in my life. But it's how do we do it and be compliant? And I mean, if it was me, if we could use it for whatever we want, I'd say, well, we need to put $10 million in economic development and incentives and move forward. But can't do it that way. So we're trying to figure out ways that we can address some of the issues when it comes to helping out with food deserts and things like that. I know we're partnering with Goodwill and some other agencies, CAC and places like that, to try to get this money distributed to be able to help people. But I mean, the guidelines are just.
Yeah, and advocating for that for the last couple of years, and I think thankfully that's happening, especially as we try to increase our resident base downtown, having access to food. And I think the pandemic kind of exposed a lot of deficiencies that we had across the board. as well. And I think you hit upon some numbers that are staggering to individuals when they read the paper or they scroll down their news feed. $10 million here, $9 million for the CAC, another $6 million for the CAC. And it looks like all the money's coming in, but the explanation that how you use the money is somewhat restrictive.
Oh, it's the hardest part. I mean, I know that CAC is purchasing pallets of food now, on a daily basis for food pantries and things like that with some of these funds, and it's just. And if you received help through CAC for rental assistance, and you can't get it again, and you can't. I mean, there's just all of these regulations that are just stifling the ability for us to get this money into the hands of people who actually need it. So that's been the hardest part. People. And we've talked a little bit about creating a one-stop shop for people for homelessness and drug rehab and help with job search and do those kind of things. It's just okay, but how do we fit them in the parameters of this money? I mean, that's what you got to be able to justify it to the feds, or else you can't spend it.
And I'll throw a suggestion out there. Washington County has almost 800 last count of nonprofits in this community. In the community, that's a substantial amount of resources that can probably be collectively used and put together. But in that, you also have a lot of people with some ideas that can probably use some of this funding or come together with some of this funding. What I rarely see, I see the big organizations, the CAC, and I sit on the board of United Way. We see those organizations engage, but if there was a collaborative effort, bring them in one day, and have a strategic meeting and hear from them. Get some of their ideas that kind of throw your way. And I know the one-offs may happen, and I'm sure they do. And I know the city and county, they work with some of these nonprofits. But I think that collectively to get individuals in the room who are boots on the ground, just like you say your staff is. I think that you have a great deal of personnel out there who are passionate, who see it day to day, who may have some ideas, who can use this funding. Because sitting in on grants is also just piecemealing it out there and not really making a major impact. But if you can get 10 organizations that are working on homeless to come together as a collective and really drive home an initiative and an idea and let them own it, run it, and get the support of the city or county or whoever's controlling funds, I think we really need to tap into some of those nonprofits as something that I would recommend the city of kind of having a nonprofit forum. Invite them all in for a day, sit down for a few hours, and let them take the helm.
Well, I do know that Shelley and the mayor and Takesha and Tierra are very involved with doing just that, talking to these nonprofits, trying to figure it out. I don't know if they've ever had a group meeting and try to figure it out. It's been my experience that once you get more than 3 or 4 people in a room, nothing gets done.
It gets hard. Definitely gets hard.
And I think it's less about getting something done, but more about collecting ideas.
Yeah, but hopefully when you collect those ideas, you enact something that gets something done.
Yes.
And that to me is here's another part of the problem, is that if, let's just say the city finds a good use for a nonprofit and they get $1 million and they can show that they can spend it, okay? And they have to increase staff and they have to do these kind. What happens when that money runs out?
Right.
Who's going to
Short
pick
term.
up that tab?
Right.
We don't want to be the pickers up of the tab, okay? So, there's got to be, okay, how can you be self-sufficient when these funds run out? Because they're gonna. Right. I mean, just like at the county with the SAFER grant and the 33 firefighters, in 3 years that money's gone.
Yep.
Okay, we got to figure out where we're going to come up with $9 million.
And I think that's the failure of grants. You get grant money, the money comes in, but you can't sustain because that grant's never guaranteed next year
Right.
or 3 years from now whatsoever. And that's why I think we need to kind of do short-term efforts, task force, project that's going to go into place over 9 months, 18 months, and then it's done. Everybody disband and go back the other way, and hopefully that brings some fruit forward or makes some kind of lasting change in some of those heavy hitters. But I think there's no right answer, right? There's no perfect answer, but I think collaboration, as you mentioned as well, that's where it starts. And not just within our government, but putting some onus back on constituents to get engaged and get involved as well. And I know a lot would love to, and I know a lot across the board need to. All right, and we've seen on social media it's easy to talk in the comments.
It is,
and it's hard to show up to a meeting. Right, so
100%.
And but at the same time, I think a lot of people still feel unheard. So I think creating those opportunities, if you can remove that obstacle, that perception that you didn't have a voice, then accountability shifts back onto the individuals.
Wow. You would think it would.
Terrence, I'm going to give you the last word on that. Bob, thank you for what I think was very informational. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate all that you've done for our city.
It's been a long time since
It has. It has. And for the rest of you, stay with us. We've got a couple of minutes left, so when we come back, Fast Five. Welcome to Fast Five, where our three panelists talk about 5 topics in this case, 5 short minutes. So let's get started. $50,000 winning Powerball ticket sold in Hagerstown, Maryland, from the Hagerstown Sunoco on Dual Highway. Terrence, Bob, what say you?
Gas prices are too high, so I know it wasn't me because I haven't been to the gas station in a while. But hopefully, someone claims the ticket. They have, I think, 180 days to do so, and this is the second $50,000 windfall in the community over the last month or so. So,
a lot of people that go into that Sunoco station are standing at the median there on Eastern Boulevard. I'm just wondering, do they know?
Yeah, that's
maybe it's one of them. I mean,
Nice.
so hopefully the word gets out and the person who purchased it comes and collects it.
Yeah, going to be interesting.
Yeah.
All right, next topic. There's a commission at the state level that is recommending pay increases for lawmakers during the next term. They're recommending an increase of about $6,306 for state lawmakers' salaries, which would bring it up to $56,636 from a current $50,330. They're saying that this is really a full-time job. What say you, Bob?
Listen, I can tell you that being in government it's very hard for it not to be eating up most of your time. So I know that our delegates and our senator are always someplace doing something, having a meeting, So, I hope that they can justify it and that they can get it. It's difficult. It's difficult to try to, take away from your family, work a full-time job, and be a lawmaker. It's nearly impossible.
Right.
Justification is what I like. I need to look at the numbers because they took a survey, which we know surveys are subjective.
Right.
And some lawmakers say they spend 40 hours a week. Others say outside of session, and others say they spend 2 hours a week. So, and they also try to use the increase in salary to justify inflation when there's a lot of commoners that also outside of legislation that haven't got to raise the inflation as well, even going to our education and healthcare workers. But they also use it to entice people of lower incomes to get into government, which I believe is just advertising. They should have left that one out of there because if I look at the median salary of these lawmakers, I know they weren't making minimum wage before they went down to Annapolis either. So, and a lot of them still have high-paying jobs. So I see the pay, but it is an elected job and it is one of service. So I believe that when we start compensating more, we take the service out of it and the sacrifice to do these jobs.
Okay. All right. A lot of new laws took effect on January 1st in several states. Let's take a look at them. In Washington, D.C., if you use a gas-powered leaf blower after January 1st, you are now a criminal and subject to a fine of up to $500. If you're in Washington, D.C., and you own a restaurant and you are automatically handing out disposable utensils, napkins, and condiment packets with orders, you are a criminal. If you, after January 15th, which is just here in a couple days, DC will require people 12 and older to provide a proof of vaccination against COVID-19 in order to enter restaurants, bars, and nightclubs. Let's start with the DC laws. What do we think?
Doesn't surprise me.
Do you have a gas-powered leaf blower, Bob?
I do not. Mine is electric, so I'd
Okay.
be safe on that.
If you do, if you get one, don't take it to DC.
No, I will not do that. I wouldn't be able to go out to eat after January 15th in D.C. because I'm not vaccinated, as I've said. So my family could probably go in, but I could stand outside and watch them. Maybe they could
Take
bring
out.
me out some condiments or something. I don't know.
As long as they don't bring you no plastic spoons without you asking.
I tell you, when you talk about the ludicrous, D.C.'s a shining example.
Okay. Terrence?
I'm used to this. In New York, you can't even have plastic straws anymore, so I'm not surprised about that from an environmental standpoint. And same thing with vaccination. You can't get into restaurants in New York as well. So it's something that I think is happening more so in big cities.
All right, well, I'm being told we're out of time, so we'll cover the rest of the new laws next week. So that's a reason for you to come back. That's all the time we have tonight. We hope you will like us on Facebook. We hope you will follow us on Twitter. We hope you will send us your comments, feedback, and suggestions to feedback@flipsidetv.com. That's feedback@flipsidetv.com. And most importantly, join us again next week for another visit to Flipside. Good night.